Well, good morning, everyone. Bienvenidos. Well, I want to thank all of you for getting up on this beautiful Santa Fe morning from the 30 states and 9 countries that you represent to be with us this morning for an unusual and what we believe will be very special symposium, Music, the Brain, Medicine, and Wellness, which really is meant to be a scientific dialogue that maybe sometimes will make us uncomfortable, maybe sometimes a little skeptical, but always interested. The symposium, really, I have to acknowledge, was the brainchild of Marc Neikrug, who's sitting here beside me, the artistic director of the Santa Fe Chamber Music Festival, who The first major project that Marc and I did together, many of you know, was Marc composed a piece of music, a fantastic piece of music called Healing Ceremony, based on the 4 aspects of Native American medicine and played by the New Mexico Symphony and sung by Susan Graham and Matthew Worth at the dedication and opening of the new University of New Mexico Cancer Center in 2009. That piece of music was written by Marc to be a healing piece of music as he understood that to evolve. And the most interesting thing about that piece when it ended was the room with 1,000 people was absolutely still. There was no applause. There was such a resounding final moment that no one wanted that energy of that moment to stop. And I thought, what is that about? And finally, slowly, after almost a moment, which doesn't seem long, but it was a long time, people began to applaud. So there was something so moving about that piece and those beautiful voices that made everyone hesitate. And Marc and I began to talk about what could we do that would be really special for the 40th anniversary of the Chamber Music Festival. And we began to scheme and connive. A lot of our friends from both of the worlds we live in thought we were absolutely nuts. I'm a, quote, real scientist, if there is such a thing. How could you organize a symposium about something that I think is totally phony? I mean, yes, music moves us. Yes, music moves the heart. Yeah, you cry. Yeah, you feel good. But actually be used in therapy? That's nuts, Cheryl. And I thought, okay, well, how will we organize this symposium? And what Marc and I began to talk about with the organizing committee, we had a really special meeting here last September with Dr. Isabel Peretz, Dr. Annie Patel, Dr. David Huron, Dr. Susan Hanser, Dr. Barrie Cassileth, all leaders in their field, and you can read about their bios, talking about what should we do that was scientifically credible. We decided we didn't want to do the usual music symposium about how most great musicians and composers are mentally ill and that's why they're such creatives. We just kind of set that topic aside. The truth is, for those of us who do science, most scientists are a little nuts. So, you know, who's not crazy? Frankly, I think most people who work on the edge of discovery have to be a little bit crazy because they have to take a leap of faith. So even the most credible science has an intuitive sense that a direction is the right one. So we took a leap of faith, and we also built on a musical theme, because the thing we began to talk about in September, it was an amazing conversation, was that if we could bring together the best scientists in the world who are laying the groundwork for scientific research and legitimate inquiry in what is the basis of music in the developing brain, how does music enhance language, thinking, auditory perception? What happens when that goes wrong in a developing child, in a person with a stroke, in a person developing Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease? Can you use that music in a therapeutic means? Is that legitimate? Is that scientifically valid? And we had wonderful conversations about those questions and decided the right thing to do was to bring those very best scientists in the world, those world-class musicians, and the people in between, the physicians and the evolving field of music therapy, to begin to talk to each other, which unfortunately we don't do enough, and define what are the most important questions in this field. Where does the science stand today? What do we need to do to lay the groundwork for the future for credible acceptance of the science? And how do we work better together from all these disciplines? The thing I think I've learned in my life that's the most important is the most important discoveries come from the boundaries of fields where people bang each other and sort of mix it up and challenge each other's thinking, because it makes you think in different frames of reference. And that's exactly what we hope this conference does. I want to thank the scientists and the musicians and the music therapists who were willing to take the leap of faith with us and trust that this might actually happen, which you're all sitting here, so it did. I think that was a dream of ours. We weren't sure what would happen, and we don't know what the future may bring. This is our first putting the foot in the water. It'll be interesting to see where we evolve. Does this become a continuing phenomenon, or is this just a good start for all of us to get together and work in different ways? That we'll find out. I want to thank several folks who made this possible. Certainly, Mr. Steve OVITSKY and the Santa Fe Chamber Music Festival. Steve is the executive director of the festival. He and his staff have been incredible. I want to thank Rayanne Payton, who's the administrative director of the UNM Cancer Center, who's done, she and her staff, a tremendous amount of work. Thank you, Rayanne. I want to thank Ms. Catherine Wood of the UNM Office of Continuing Medical Education, because she's laid the infrastructure for the meeting. And for our medical, nursing, and healthcare professionals in the audience, there is formal continuing medical education credit. Thank you, Catherine, very much for all of your work for us. And I particularly want to thank the Gabrielle's Angel Foundation. I'm on the board of directors of the Gabrielle's Foundation in New York, as is Dr. Barrie Cassileth. And I want to tell a very quick story about why Denise Rich, the head of that foundation, sat down and wrote me out a $150,000 check to make this conference possible without even hesitating, because she experienced firsthand what this was about. Her daughter, Gabrielle Rich, was a beautiful woman, and developed Hodgkin's disease when she was 19, and had intensive radiation and chemotherapy for advanced Hodgkin's disease, and then developed leukemia. So the Gabrielle's Angel Foundation was named in honor of Gabrielle to fund research in leukemia and blood cell disorders, which is my area of expertise. But Denise also watched her daughter go through very painful chemotherapy, radiation therapy, 2 bone marrow transplantations, and all the attendant consequences of that. It was a very painful and very difficult experience. Her leukemia, as many of you know, arose secondary to the drugs that were used to treat her Hodgkin's disease, and those forms of leukemia are very resistant to any intervention. And she was dying in the hospital at Sloan Kettering, and the family was devastated. And on Gabrielle's dying day, Denise thought it might be a good idea to bring in a quartet from the New York Philharmonic. And she asked some players to come over, and they sat around Gabby's bedside. This was 15 years ago, a long time ago, before sort of we thought about these things. And as they played one of Gabrielle's favorite pieces of music, she woke up and talked to her family and said goodbye. And when the piece was over, she died. And Denise is convinced that whatever that was, how that happened, was the most important and moving event in their family's life and should be replicated for others. But there's a scientific basis to that. And so I wanted to tell that story because why that organization founded this conference is very important to them, and I really want to thank them, and I'm grateful to them for their work. I also want to thank Barrie, Dr. Cassileth, who is I consider the founder of the field of integrative medicine, alternative and complementary medicine in oncology from Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. And Barrie is a scientist par excellence. Her whole field has been the evolution of legitimacy of real alternative interventions in medicine. And I want to thank her for being my conscience and my guide. It's been a great honor in my life to get to know her. And I really want to thank her for being part of creating the credible science in the symposium. I'd like to have her say a couple words of welcome.
Thank you, Cheryl, and good morning to everyone. I guess I represent those who practice and study music therapy, particularly in an oncology setting. I think this is extremely important. It's one of the first things I did when I was brought to Sloan Kettering in 1999, 13 years ago, was to initiate a robust music therapy program. And you will hear some presentations tomorrow to see what this looks like, because we have some videos as well as some slides to share with you. So I'm delighted to be here. I'm happy to see all of you, and I look forward to talking with many of you in person as the few days go by. Thank you so much.
I'd like to ask Marc Neikrug, the Artistic Director of the Chamber Music Festival, to say a few words also. Welcome.
Good morning. I parked my car in a very dangerous spot, hoping to get a ticket so that I will actually believe that this isn't still a dream. It's been years, actually, that I didn't imagine this room. It's a little too scientific for me, but imagining this coming together, and what I mean by this is as a representative of probably every performing musician and composer today and going back, it's such a justification for what we've always known every time we walk on the stage or every time we hear a piece performed or try and write a piece for people. We've always known that there is more to it than it sounds nice or it makes us feel this way or that way. And we are all counting on you scientists to prove us right and to legitimize in a quantifiable way what we've always known. So it's an honor for us to have you all here. I hope you have time to enjoy a little bit of Santa Fe, and we look forward to hearing everything that you're doing. And in addition to that, obviously, assuming that what you're finding out is actually right, and I do assume that, it becomes very important to transfer that to the therapists and be able to use this incredibly powerful music in ways to help everyone. Thank you.
Steve, would you like to say a few words of welcome also? Steve OVITSKY, the Executive Director of the Chamber Music Festival.
Good morning, everyone. And as Cheryl said, it's so wonderful to see so many people from around the country and from around the world who are attending this event here in our fair town of Santa Fe. There's nothing I can add to what Marc and Cheryl and Barrie have already said, but I will mention a couple of, since I'm the executive director, not the artistic director, I'll mention a couple of housekeeping things. In addition to the wonderful sessions that we'll be having in this room, there's also great music that's part of the Chamber Music Festival. And this afternoon at 5 o'clock in the Lenzik, a concert of 4 Bach keyboard concertos played by Inan Barnatan with a remarkably great string ensemble. And then tomorrow evening at 6 in the Lenzik, a program that Alan Gilbert will not only be conducting, as you often see him conducting the New York Philharmonic, where he's music director, but also playing in Mendelssohn's octet. He'll be conducting the first of the chamber symphonies by Arnold Schoenberg, playing in the Mendelssohn Octet with a reunion of the members of the great Guarneri Quartet and other wonderful musicians. And the program will begin with the Mozart Piano Quartet in E-flat, which was played on the very first concert of the Santa Fe Chamber Music Festival 40 years ago. And so that will be tomorrow evening. And if you haven't already, this is the advertising part, but if you haven't already acquired your tickets for that, either through the registration for the symposium or through the ticket office, the festival has a fellow sitting outside at the desk who will be glad to arrange tickets for you. So you just ask for Derek or ask anyone at the desk about tickets and he will take care of you. Also remember that tomorrow afternoon at 3:30 at the St. Francis Auditorium, and that's a beautiful facility if you've not been in there yet. Those of you who were there last night know what a gorgeous place that is for music. A beautiful courtyard when it's not pouring, and a wonderful mission-style auditorium with great acoustics. Tomorrow afternoon, Ani Patel and David Huron, who are part of this wonderful weekend seminar, will be talking and providing musical examples with brass quintet and percussion. So that will be at 3:30 tomorrow. And again, you can see someone from the continuing medical education registration out here for information about that tomorrow afternoon. Thank you all for being here. It's great to see so many people attending this wonderful event. I see musicians, I see scientists, I see music lovers, and that's precisely the integrated part of what we wanted to do with this symposium. As Marc and Cheryl said, it's been 2 years in the making, and we're just delighted that you are making it happen. Thank you.
There are 2 more people I'd like to quickly introduce. First is Mr. Doug Brown and his wife, Sarah. Doug is the president of the board of directors of the Chamber Music Festival. Doug has been a tremendous supporter of our work as we've evolved the program over the last couple years and helped us deal with the "are you crazy" sort of reactions. Thank you, Doug. We hold you close in our heart. And also Mrs. Tony Zavostovsky, Tony, who has helped us so much with the organizing and planning of the events, and Mr. Ken Marvel. I'm not sure if Ken is here yet this morning. So Tony and Ken, thank you. I'd also like to introduce Jill Udall, the better half of our Senator Tom Udall. Jill is very much known across the country for her support and interest in arts and culture. So Jill, thank you so much for being here today. Next, it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Josephine Briggs. I have a special place in my heart for Josie. She doesn't know why, because my first NIH grant was from an institute at the National Institutes of Health called NIDDK, because they fund hematology research. Dr. Briggs is a nephrologist by training, and quite a famous one at that, who's had a really stellar career. And after her work in medicine and science went, and you can read her bio online, and also in our program books, Dr. Briggs went to the National Institutes of Health and began to drive national science programs. The first institute she ran was NIDDK, and it was wonderful to have that funding for me in my early career. And she's gone on to take major leadership roles at the National Institutes of Health and is running several key committees now for Director Harold Varmus at the National Institutes of Health to look at what the leading edge of new scientific funding should be. And one of the major institutes that Dr. Briggs has really directed and began to build, I have to say with some skepticism from the real scientists, was the National Institute of, or the National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine at the National Institutes of Health. And she's built that institute and that center into quite a credible one that funds the very kind of science we're talking about today. And what was interesting in our first phone conversation some time ago as we planned this meeting was the realization that there wasn't a lot of funding going on from the NIH in the actual fields of music intervention and music and neuroscience, some from the Neurosciences Institutes. And we began to talk about where is the state of the science in this field. And Dr. Briggs began to be a partner and a participant in our program with many suggestions, and it's a wonderful honor to have her here from Washington, D.C. So thank you, Dr. Briggs.
Well, I am really thrilled to be here. What a wonderful event. What a wonderful interdisciplinary event. What a great city. What a beautiful chamber music festival. So this is going to be just a superb few days, and I'm really thrilled to be asked to participate. As an opening, I'm going to spend 3 minutes. We're slightly behind time, so I'm not, and I have a part of a panel later, so I can tell you more about the center I head later in the course of the next couple days, because I've embedded into my PowerPoint presentation a little demonstration, and I really want to show it to you. So I want to save about 5 minutes for that. As Cheryl mentioned, I do head the National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine, and this is a place in the federal government with the potential to investigate the kind of work that's being talked about here. I know this kind of work is also of substantial interest to my colleagues in the National Cancer Institute. They even have deeper pockets than we do. And I know Jeff White from NCI very much wanted to join you. But anyway, our mission is to define through rigorous scientific investigation the usefulness and safety of complementary and alternative medicine interventions and their role in improving health. Complementary and alternative medicine is poorly defined, but we consider it to be anything that is not currently accepted by the mainstream. So naturally, we're a bit controversial. But if you study the history of medicine, it's amazing how important ideas, quirky ideas that came from outside the mainstream are now very much part of standard of care. The idea of Pilates was that rigorous physical exercise would help people recovering from major trauma. It's basically the basis of physical therapy. But in the period after World War I, that was highly controversial, and surgeons didn't believe in it. Another one is the idea that breastfeeding was a good idea. That was pushed by the La Leche League, and pediatricians in the 60s, including the American Pediatric Association, recommended against breastfeeding. Amazing, right? Other examples, it would include hospice care, Lamaze techniques. And so our job is to help direct federal dollars to quirky ideas that are coming from outside the mainstream that look plausible and worthy of serious study. And that falls in this broad arena of complementary and alternative or integrative medicine. And I think we have a very robust portfolio of very good science. So a big focus for us is the management of pain. Opioids are not good drugs. We are in the middle of a prescription drug abuse epidemic in this country. It's a major cause of accidental deaths or overdoses. And we all, as physicians, need better ways to handle pain. And it's a quirky, non-mainstream idea that acupuncture or acupressure or mindfulness-based stress reduction or yoga or Tai Chi might help with pain management. But I think it's a good idea. So the little demonstration I want to do for you comes from an insight that comes from our portfolio on mindfulness meditation, or MBSR. This is a tradition, a meditative tradition that's based very heavily on Buddhist teachings. But the aim by teachers of mindfulness is to build a set of mental skills for people in attention regulation, in the ability to focus attention not on ruminative thoughts and things in their past or future fears that are dominating them, but focus attention on the present. And I've been very intrigued by this work and by the general concept that attention regulation is a valuable skill. And I think that's relevant to the work we're going to hear about today, and I want to show you why. So the musicians, the classical musicians in the room, I suspect to know this piece. This is the opening of the third movement of the adagio, second movement, maybe adagio movement of the violin concerto, violin sonata. My mother was a violinist, a pretty good one. I was the non-musical member of the family, and in spite of a few years of forced piano lessons, it was felt by everyone it wasn't really taking. But I remain a person who listens with pleasure to music, but my mind wanders. I ruminate on what is going on elsewhere in my life, and I've often felt that being a more trained listener would enhance my pleasure of music. My husband, in contrast, is a very disciplined listener, and as I sit next to him at a concert, I'm aware that my mind is wandering, and his mind is with the melody, and I envy that, and I'm actually trying at my advanced age to see if I can cultivate those mental skills. So I'm going to ask you to listen one more time to these opening bars, but this time we're going to have the sheet music in front of us. So I think they're very different experiences, and I think that the musically trained brain has an attention regulation skill that is awesome, and I admire it, and I think it is something that by having people more participatory in music, we will be giving them a mental skill that may be helpful in a variety of health settings. We certainly are seeing that meditation is helpful in health care settings. So much of the program in the next couple of days talks about music and its role in capturing emotional states. But I also would put on the agenda talking and thinking about the ability of the person who is either trained musically or perhaps who is dancing to keep their attention on the music, and what a wonderful attention regulation skill that is. So those are my opening comments. Thank you so much all for being here. I'm really looking forward to the next couple of days.
Thank you so much, Dr. Briggs. We're going to move very quickly into our first session, and I just have a couple housekeeping remarks. It's very important, as our speakers know, to stay on time for several reasons. Number one, we want to make sure we give everyone allotted their time to speak, and we're already a few minutes late. So tomorrow we'll start very promptly at 8 o'clock. Also, the musicians in our audience have rehearsals right at noon for all of the wonderful concerts you've been hearing about. So our musicians who are on our panel later this morning have to go off quickly so that they can practice. A couple things that I've been questioned about. We did not print the slides of our presenters in your books, but they are going to be made available on the website from the UNM Cancer Center after the meeting. And so we will work with our presenters to prepare their slides and allow us to put the public version of those slides on the website. So if, for those of you trying to take notes or write down busily, a lot of this information will be available to you after the meeting. We're also live video recording the presentations and the slides. And the scientific committee will work. We're discussing actually making the live video feed available after the meeting as well to meeting participants and to the general public. So I would ask others of you in the audience not to video with your iPhone because of a couple reasons. Some of the materials you'll see are unpublished. Some are copyright protected. You're also going to see some patient videos where there are health privacy issues, and so we would ask you to respect that. And as we produce the final video from the meeting, we will have to deal with those copyrights and privacy issues to make sure that the recording that we put out is acceptable to both our presenters and the public.